What is rock music really? A sound, a spirit, or something buried deep in every generation that refuses to be told what to do? Before playlists, before algorithms, there was a sound that couldn't be contained. It wasn't made to trend, it was made to burn. Before pop ruled the radio, before hip-hop ruled the charts, there was rock. It didn't just play loud, it shook nations. It gave a voice to the voiceless. It challenged wars, governments, and the way people thought music should sound. But behind the noise, there was always something deeper, a movement born from pain, race, rebellion, and the raw need to be heard. Before Nirvana tore through the 90s, before Queen filled stadiums, before the Beatles changed the world, there was Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, the forgotten architects who built the stage everyone else stood on. They didn't just make songs, they rewired the sound of a generation. But what happened next wasn't just about music, it was about freedom, about how a rhythm became rebellion, and how that rebellion became the soundtrack of modern life. This is the story of rock music, how it began, how it rose, how it broke, and why it still matters. In 1948, America was humming with static. The war was over, but the peace was restless. Cities were rebuilding, suburbs spreading, factories buzzing again, and somewhere between the church pews of the South and the smoky clubs of Chicago, a new kind of rhythm was forming. Music on the radio was safe. Tidy crooners in tuxedos, love songs dressed in white smiles. But outside the radio towers, another sound was growing. It was dirtier, louder, and far too alive to fit between polite advertisements. Behind closed doors, black communities in the South were wrestling with segregation, poverty, and the pressure of survival. Yet out of that struggle came sound. Gospel choirs shaking walls on Sunday, bluesmen bending notes in juke joints by Friday. They weren't chasing fame, they were chasing freedom. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across town, country pickers and dusty bars were telling their own stories. Heartbreak, trains, work, whiskey, white America's blues. Nobody called it rock yet, but the ingredients were already mixing. Hold that sound in your head and now add rhythm, the backbeat, the clap on 2 and 4 that made the body move before the mind could decide. It was gospel's fire meeting blues grit, meeting country's twang. When you stir all that together, something dangerous starts to rise. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. This wasn't born in a studio. It was born in basements, in borrowed guitars and broken amps. Sister Rosetta Tharpe was ripping electric riffs in church before any man dared to call it rock. Chuck Berry was turning blues storytelling into teenage rebellion. Little Richard was screaming into microphones like he'd swallowed lightning. They didn't fall out of a label meeting. They were built in the noise of segregation and sweat, powered by faith and rhythm. By the early 1950s, something was changing fast. The airwaves started to crack open. Independent radio stations, often run by young, broke dreamers, began spinning race records, breaking the color line one track at a time. And kids, white kids, were listening. They'd never heard anything like it. Their parents hated it. That only made it better. Hold that picture. America in black and white, literally and culturally, now set a guitar on fire in the middle of it. That's rock and roll. It wasn't about technical skill. It was about feeling. The mistake that stayed in time, the shout that cracked the mic. It said to every kid trapped in a small town or a small mind, you can be louder than this world. Elvis Presley became the spark that set the flame off, but the fuel had been waiting, poured by Rosetta, Berry, Richard, and dozens more whose names History buried under record label polish. Quick reality check. The industry tried to control it. They tried to clean it, sell it, and make it behave, but you can't trademark rebellion. Rock music didn't just arrive, it escaped. And here's where the story deepens, because the sound that freed a generation also exposed everything America tried to hide: race, class, fear, power. The beat was more than rhythm, it was resistance. By the mid-1950s, teenagers were sneaking out to hear it, preachers were condemning it, and record executives were cashing in. Everyone wanted a piece of this wild new sound. Nobody understood it, but nobody could stop it. Hold that image: a world split between black and white, gospel and greed, safety and danger, and listen closely to the rhythm under it. That's where rock was born. It wasn't just new music, it was a revolution with a backbeat, and the story is only getting louder. It's 1963. The world feels like it's turning faster. America's still humming to the safe harmonies of crooners and polished pop. But across the Atlantic, in the gray, smoky streets of Liverpool, something loud is starting to move. The sound is raw, electric, full of youth that doesn't care what the grown-ups think. Guitars that sound like engines, hair that breaks dress codes, 4 kids in matching suits, rehearsing in basements so damp their amps short out. The Beatles weren't invented in a boardroom. They were forged in the noise of factory towns, post-war hunger, and the need to feel alive. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, London was waking up. Young people were restless, broke, but dreaming. The streets were alive with rhythm and blues from America's black artists. Muddy Waters, Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley. British kids soaked it up, copied it, and then twisted it into their own pulse. What they created didn't sound important. It sounded like rebellion with an accent. And then the first spark, the Beatles, Please Please Me. After that song, the room tilted. The first time they played it live, people stopped talking. It didn't sound like a new act. It sounded like a weapon. Freeze the frame. Listen to that hook one more time. It's not perfect. It's anxious, urgent. You can hear the hunger in every harmony. Within a year, they went from sweaty clubs in Hamburg to national TV. And by 1964, the Beatles hit America like a meteor. In a single night on The Ed Sullivan Show, over 70 million people watched 4 young men change music history. The kids screamed, the parents panicked, the critics called it noise, but to the teenagers, it felt like freedom. Hold that thought. Because the invasion wasn't just the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Who, the Kinks. Each came from the same working class furnace. Each took the blues and made it dangerous again. Where the Beatles smiled, the Stones snarled. The Who smashed their instruments to prove rock's destruction was part of its art. The Kinks told stories about real people, not fairy tales. Quick reality check. The press thought it was a fad. They said it would burn out in 6 months, but 6 months later, the radio was all guitars. The numbers didn't tell it, the footage did. Crowds collapsing, police lines failing, girls fainting in waves. By 1966, something shifted. The music turned inward. The Beatles went from pop to poetry. Rubber Soul, Revolver, Sgt. Pepper. Lyrics got deeper. Songs weren't just about love anymore. They were about war, class, drugs, peace, and the meaning of life. Across the ocean, America was changing too. Vietnam, civil rights, Woodstock on the horizon. A generation that didn't trust anyone over 30 was building its own religion, and rock was the sermon. Freeze that frame. The Beatles in London, Bob Dylan plugging in his electric guitar in Newport, Jimi Hendrix setting it on fire at Monterey. The world wasn't just hearing rock anymore, it was living it. And then the backlash landed. Conservative America called it sinful. Newspapers labeled it noise pollution. Preachers said it was the devil's music again, but it was too late. Rock had already taken over the planet. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. The British invasion didn't just give America new bands, it gave the world permission to create to rebel, to believe that music could mean something more than entertainment. By the time Woodstock arrived in 1969, the transformation was complete. Rock wasn't just rebellion, it was identity, a global language, a mirror for every protest sign and love song. Hold that image. Thousands of people in the rain, mud, and chaos, believing that music could save them. That's how the decade ended, and that's how rock became more than sound. It became a generation's heartbeat, but the beat didn't stop there, because after every rise comes the next wave, louder, heavier, stranger, and the 1970s were about to prove just how far rock could go. By the early 1970s, rock had grown up and blown up. What started as rebellion was now empire. The hair was longer, the stages were bigger, the volume was enough to shake buildings, but the sound wasn't just louder, it was smarter, deeper, more complex. This was the decade when rock learned how to look like power. The myth engine kicked into overdrive. Bands didn't just make records, they made worlds. Led Zeppelin looked like storm gods with guitars. Pink Floyd hid behind light shows and mystery. Black Sabbath terrified church groups. Queen turned rock into theater. They weren't just selling music, they were selling permission. Permission to dress how you wanted, talk how you wanted, and feel everything louder than society allowed. Every poster, every album cover, every scandal was part of the design. Parents complained, kids copied. Quick reality check. Meanwhile, across living rooms, something else was happening. Stereos were getting better. The record became a ritual. You didn't just listen, you entered it. Needle drops, smoke in the air, lights low. Rock had become an experience, and the 1970s made it cinematic. Now, strip the tabloids away and listen closely. The secret weapon was craft. Solo the drums. Hear John Bonham's swing. It's not just pounding, it's groove. A human machine that breathes between the hits. That push-pull makes Zeppelin feel unstoppable. Solo the bass. Geezer Butler from Black Sabbath, weaving darkness under the guitars. One note held too long, and suddenly you feel the whole world tilting. Solo the voice. Freddie Mercury's range from velvet to lightning. Every syllable a performance. That's not just singing. That's storytelling at the edge of physics. Hold that sound in your head. Now add the studio. The 1970s producer was a new kind of wizard. Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon wasn't just an album, it was an audio illusion. Tape loops, reversed echoes, heartbeats, recorded through machines built for science labs. One studio trick you can't unhear after this, the way money uses a cash register loop as rhythm. It's not random, it's math turned into groove. Freeze the frame. Watch how they built their myths through sound. Zeppelin recorded in stairwells for natural reverb. Sabbath tuned down their guitars to make it feel heavier, literally darker. Queen stacked dozens of vocal tracks to sound like a choir of angels trapped in an amplifier, and that's why copycats never quite felt right. Because underneath the hair, the fame, the tabloid rumors, these bands were engineers of emotion. Every decision, every echo, chord, and lyric pulled you deeper into their universe. Hold that idea, rock as world building. It wasn't about radio singles anymore, it was about albums that demanded attention. Physical graffiti, Wish You Were Here, A Night at the Opera. Each one a statement that music could be art, and art could fill a stadium. Of course, the bigger it got, the more dangerous it became. The drugs, the ego, the distance from the fans. Critics called it excess. Punk was waiting in the wings, sharpening its knives. But for now, rock ruled the planet. Quick reality check. Across the world, people spoke different languages, lived under different governments, but everyone knew the sound of an overdriven guitar. Rock had become a global currency, and yet the magic was still personal. Ask anyone who was there. They'll tell you about a concert that felt like religion. Lights blinding, bass shaking the ribs, thousands of strangers moving as one heartbeat. That's what the 70s did. It turned rock from rebellion into communion, a shared pulse, a language of escape. But every empire faces its turning point, and just as the 70s closed, new voices were gathering in the dark, louder, faster, angrier. The machine was about to crash. Because after the golden age always comes the reckoning, and the next chapter of rock wasn't about perfection, it was about tearing the system down.
Hey, Pop Lore family. Did you know only 1% of viewers are subscribed? If you love deep dives into pop legends, forgotten gems, and the stories behind the songs that shaped generations, hit that subscribe button right now. And don't forget to turn on LL notifications so you'll be the first to know when we premiere our next video. It's free, it helps Pop Lore grow, and it makes sure you never miss a single countdown or music story. Let's build this community together.
By the end of the 1970s, rock was choking on its own success. The stadiums were full, the records were massive, but something underneath had cracked. The rebellion that once felt pure now looked bloated. Limos, label parties, million-dollar tours. The fire that started in basements had turned into a business. Behind the posters was a price tag: sleep, blood, sanity. The grind was brutal. Months on tour blurred into years. 1,000 miles between each stage. Interviews that never stopped. Managers counting profits while the musicians counted pills. Listen to how the tempo feels heavier now. The songs that once screamed freedom started to sound like cries for help. And that's where the new generation kicked the door in. The Sex Pistols, the Clash, the Ramones. They didn't want perfection. They wanted truth. 3 chords, raw vocals, and lyrics you could shout instead of sing. Punk wasn't trying to entertain you. It was trying to wake you up. Quick reality check. While arena rock was drowning in solos, punk bands were surviving on adrenaline and attitude. Small clubs, broken strings, no budget, no backup plan. The Pistols didn't fade. They detonated. 1 record, 1 tour, and then the collapse. But the blast left a crater that changed everything. We're going to sit with this for a second, because behind the chaos was exhaustion, physical, creative, emotional. The industry didn't understand punk, so it tried to control it. Labels wanted the energy without the danger. Radio refused to play it. Government censored it. But you can't package a scream. Listen closely. The cost wasn't just fame burnout. There were real losses. Ian Curtis of Joy Division, brilliant and broken, couldn't carry the weight of his own lyrics. His death in 1980 silenced a voice that defined the sound of despair for an entire generation. And from that grief, New Order was born, proof that even in collapse, something new can rise. Hold that contrast, punk's flame fading, while something cooler, stranger, and more cerebral takes its place. That's post-punk and new wave. The Cure, Talking Heads, U2. They replaced anger with atmosphere. The guitars shimmered instead of screamed. The beats became machines. The rebellion went digital. Freeze the frame. MTV launches in 1981, and suddenly, image becomes as powerful as sound. Rock's new icons weren't just heard, they were seen. David Byrne's suits, Robert Smith's hair, Bono's Messiah glare. Each look a manifesto, but fame through a screen came with its own cost. Now every mistake was broadcast, every identity polished and sold back to the fans. Numbers don't tell it, the footage does. The endless touring, the studio deadlines, the creative pressure to stay relevant in a world that changed every month. Even the best cracked under it. Addiction, burnouts, legal fights. The same rebellion that freed them now demanded constant reinvention. This is the part fans don't put on t-shirts. The price of being the voice of a generation is that you never get to rest. For some, the cost was anonymity, fading quietly into underground scenes. For others, it was their lives. And yet, even in the chaos, the spirit never died. Punk's destruction built a new foundation. The Cure turned sadness into beauty. Talking Heads turned anxiety into art. U2 turned politics into anthems, but the era was ending. The underground had gone mainstream and the lines between art and industry blurred again. Rock had reinvented itself, but it had also fractured. The pure rebellion of the 70s had split into fragments. Punk, goth, synthpop, indie, each carrying a piece of the old fire, none of them holding it completely. Listen to how the tempo slows here. This is the sound of a movement catching its breath. The world had changed, and rock, for the first time, was no longer the only revolution in town, but the question was already forming in the background. After all the noise, all the pain, and all the glory, could rock survive the modern world? And that's where we go next, because the fall wasn't the end, it was the reset.
This video is sponsored by the Lore Store on Amazon, your one-stop shop for music lovers across reggae, rock, pop, and hip-hop. We built it for real listeners who don't want to dig through 1,000 listings to find the right gear. Inside the Lore Store, you'll find 5 aisles. VIP, top, battle-tested essentials. Headphones, turntables, speakers, gig-safe earplugs, smart speakers. Reggae vibe, roots and lovers. Rock made easy. Automatic decks, warm bookshelf speakers, vinyl care. Rock lore, classic rock must-haves. Open back cans, simple amps, living room concert vibes. Pop lore, feel-good everyday setups, clean, clear speakers, easy streaming, nostalgia-friendly picks. Hip-hop must-haves, punchy bass without the muddle, closed-back headphones and living room systems that handle low-end, plus a rotating crate of old album vinyl if you're rebuilding a 60s-90s collection. Every product page tells you who it's for, 3 pros, 1 con, and why we picked it. So you can choose with confidence. Flying soon? Check. VIP for noise canceling that tames plane roar. Mostly listening at home? Try open back headphones that let live albums breathe. Want instant gratification vinyl? Our fully automatic turntable is 1 button from silence to music, and the record cleaning kit knocks down crackle so the bass tightens up. Headed to shows? Grab high-fidelity earplugs. Hands-free at home? Our smart speaker picks let you say play 70s reggae or classic pop, and you're there. Deal alert! If you use the link in the description, you'll land on our curated picks with current best available Amazon pricing and active discounts where applicable. Prices change, so buy now to lock in today's deal. Tap the link in the description, pick your aisle, grab a favorite, and tell me which category you want me to build next. The Lore Store. Listen better, with gear that gets out of the way and lets the music live.
Before streaming, before algorithms decided what you liked, there was the sound of rebellion that lived in every garage, basement, and sweaty club. Rock wasn't built for playlists. It was built for moments that cracked something open inside you. But here's the question. What happens when the revolution becomes history? When every chord, scream, and anthem gets archived, reissued, and remastered, does the spirit fade, or does it evolve into something new? That's where our story lands, the 1990s to today, the years that asked if rock could still matter in a world that had already seen it all. Listen to how the energy shifts here. After punk and new wave burned through the 80s, the early 90s felt like silence before the storm. Then came grunge, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, raw emotion replacing glamour. The clothes were simpler, the lyrics darker, the sound stripped back to its bones. Before Nirvana, the mainstream was all polish. After Nirvana, everyone chased the dirt. Even pop needed to sound real again. Grunge wasn't just a genre, it was a mirror. It showed what happens when success and sadness live in the same song. But like every wave before it, the weight of fame crushed the people who carried it. Cobain's death wasn't just personal tragedy, it was another turning point, proof that the cost of authenticity can be unbearable. We're going to sit with that for a second because right after the fall, something new began to rise. again. By the 2000s, rock was morphing. The Strokes, the White Stripes, Arctic Monkeys, they brought back attitude without excess. They weren't trying to be legends, they were trying to feel alive. And that's the secret. Every new generation finds its own way to make rock dangerous again. Spot the lineage. You can hear Kurt Cobain's howl in Billie Eilish's whispers. You can feel the Clash's defiance in Kendrick Lamar's verses. You can sense Bowie's shape-shifting DNA in every artist who reinvents their image online. Rock didn't die, it dissolved into everything. Hip-hop took its swagger, pop took its hooks, electronic music took its sense of freedom. Even when you don't hear guitars, you still feel rock's pulse in the way artists break rules, bend genres, and chase truth over perfection. Okay, let's zoom out. The legacy isn't just in the sound, it's in the echoes that travel through time. Listen to one sample you've heard 1,000 times, that crunchy guitar line in a hip-hop track, that lo-fi drum loop buried under a pop hit. Each one is a quiet nod to rock's ancestors. And the afterlife, it's alive everywhere. Tribute nights in tiny bars, reunions in packed stadiums, vinyl reissues that sell out faster than new releases, documentaries, playlists, murals, all reminders that the fire still burns, even if it flickers differently. Now look around in 2025. The kids are rediscovering what the parents lived. Teenagers wear Ramones shirts they found online, not knowing that the sound behind it started in a dive bar with a broken amp. TikTok resurrects old riffs and turns them viral again. What's new feels old, and what's old feels fresh. That's the beauty of rock's echo. So why now? Because the world feels loud again, chaotic, uncertain, divided, and in times like that, people crave something honest. That's what rock has always been. It's not about guitars or leather jackets. It's about telling the truth when everyone else is pretending. If you're just discovering it, start anywhere. Put on Nevermind. Play London Calling, drop the needle on The Dark Side of the Moon. Let one song hit you in the chest, because that's where it starts. Once it does, you'll start hearing its DNA in everything else you love today. And maybe that's the real evolution. Rock doesn't need to dominate the charts anymore to matter. It's in the bloodstream of music itself. Every act that dares to sound different, that risks being real, is part of the same long story.